So this is how to draw Mustelids or Mustelids. You can pronounce it either way. My name is Gale Tazin, and I'll be hosting this panel. Thank you for being here at 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning. This is an unholy hour, but you did it anyway. Thank you. So how this panel came about. I was at the Table of Slinks panel at last year's Anthrocon, and a common thread we were talking about is that it can be hard to commission art sometimes because most of the artists in this fandom mainly draw dogs and cats. Nothing against dogs and cats, they're really cool. But I picked a weasel persona because I really liked that they were that shape. I just look at it and I'm like, oh, that's it. That's the thing. If I saw a dog and thought that way, I would be a dog. But I don't, so I don't want my weasels drawn like dogs or cats. They're just really obscure creatures that they're hard to study and people don't look at them that much. Well, I can actually do that because I have expertise in this. My persona is a fisher, scientific name Picanha penati. I've been hyperfixated on mustelids since I read a Ranger Rick article in 2008. Yeah, and I did actual weasel science. I have a degree in critterology. This is my graduation cap. It has a ferret in a party hat with a balloon on its tail. Yeah, I drew that. That was before I became a furry. So I wrote a thesis on fishers, and then later decided that was my persona. So I came about it kind of an unusual way. So I've been a furry since 2021. If you want my socials and links, I'm at Gale Tazin on Twitter and Telegram. At Blue Sky, I'm just G Tazin. Some people get lost about that. And all my links are at linktree/Gale Tazin. So another thing, why I figured I was good at this is because I had to do a lot of this in college, where we'd have these camera tracked images, and we'd have to say, which animal is it? Now, I have two different animals that are very similar here. What sort of things can help you tell them apart?
Their ears.
Yeah, that's a great one. So if you look at this guy, you see how the ear ends kind of by the top here, and this one, the ears end up here. What are some other things?
The tail.
Yeah, the tail. So if you look at this one, it's got a really bushy, rounded tail. And this one, its tail's pointing away from the camera, but you can see it goes kind of to a little point there. And also you can tell in this lighting, but not always, but this one has darker fur than this one. So this one is a fisher, and this one is a marten. A lot of people know what a marten is and not what a fisher is. So when I commission artists, sometimes I have to just explain what a fisher is, or I'll link the Wikipedia article and send pictures of actual fishers. And so they still look very similar, but they're still very subtle differences. And since I'm this thing and not this thing, I like it when artists draw me like this. Now, how about my art skills? So I do claim to be, I am a professional critterologist. I work as a biologist for my day job, but I'm not and have never claimed to be a professional artist. I was not a doodly kid. I've had one art class since middle school, that was in 2012. Also, that art class was comics, which is not particularly about drawing things well, more just about representing things in a way that hits people in the emotions just right. But in 2019, I took a drawing challenge called Mustelid May, where you draw a mustelid for every day in May according to a different prompt. And I really wanted to do that because I was like, wow, weasels are just so cool. And I really want to be able to create this shape myself. So I spent a lot of time looking at reference images, and I copied a lot of poses directly. Yeah, so now for the rest of this slideshow, the art that is on here is either going to be mine, commissioned by me, or from artists that gave me permission to use their work in here. The photographs I all got from the World Wide Web. So if you're watching this recording and you own the copyright to one of those images, I'm sorry. Thank you to all the artists. I think your art is really cool. Also, I got to do a shameless plug for my own comic. Tomorrow is the 1-year anniversary of that. That's a big thing that got me drawing better, was forcing myself to do it regularly for comic updates. But it's called Pink Ghosts. It's mainly an excuse for me to draw noodle creatures. It can be read at pinkghosts.cfw.me. That link is also in my link tree and on my socials. Now, what is a mustelid evolutionarily? They are the most diverse clade of carnivores. They are in the dog half of order Carnivora. So that's these red lines here. So Canidae is dogs, and we got bears, different seals, walruses, and then these guys. And then over here is the cat side. So the cat side also includes hyenas and mongooses and civets and genets. So civets and genets and mongooses are kind of like the mustelids of the cat side. There's also, if you go to the order of marsupials, which is nowhere near this in the carnivore clade, they're all the way on the other side of the tree in Australia. There's the quoll family, Dasyuridae. Dasyuridae means hairy tail. So they have hair all the way down their tails. Now, a disclaimer about everything else I'm going to say is that I am not trying to gatekeep your persona. I am not trying to douse your creativity. Here's examples from my own comic where I broke some of the rules that I'm going to be saying. And some of the artists that I featured break some of those rules. Draw them in a way that makes you happy. If you want undershading all the way down to the base of the tail, if you want to draw 4 toes, be my guest. If I really cared that much, I would not be drawing comics, I would be drawing photorealism. So you can still have it both ways. You can still have a lot of those design elements that are anatomically correct and still have it look toonish. It's more cute this way too. So general rules about all mustelids. Oh, I'm actually gonna go back because I forgot to mention this. So a lot of people think of skunks as mustelids, and they used to be in that family until 1997 when a genetic analysis revealed that mustelids were more closely related to Procyonidae, the raccoon family. And so here's Ailuridae, the red panda family. So all 4 of these families can be referred to as musteloids with an O. So they're still musteloids, but they are now mephidids, and they're not mustelids themselves. Stink badgers also got kicked out into this family. General traits of all the mustelids. So they are small carnivores. They are the smallest ones. They've got very low slung and elongate bodies. They have very thick fur, as I mentioned, because they lose that heat so quickly. So they have to have really thick fur to trap the air and keep that in. Now, here's where people start to get mad at me. They have 5 toes per paw. All of them have 5. They also have plantigrade feet. You can look at this guy here, and that sole is all the way flat on the surface it's standing on. And here's 5 toe beans on a ferret. Now, like I said, if that's just really hard for you to draw, you do not have to. It is okay. But if you like being anatomically correct, you could draw all 5. They have a shorter snout than canids, so it kind of gets rounded off here. Here's these otters. You can see it's a lot shorter. When I said this at Midwest Fur Fest, that they have their power concentrated at the back, someone in the audience yelled out, "Mustelids have butts." That is correct. If you really want to get that weasel shape correct, you can't be afraid of giving them a caboose. So I highlighted where their thighs are. Look at how chonky and swole this is. Like, they've got really short legs, but they've got the power concentrated there for doing the sprawling. They jump really far and they run really fast, and they gotta pounce quickly on things. So they've got a lot of back leg. That's another thing that people don't always get when they're drawing these, is they give them like dippy little legs. And like, no, I gotta have the springs. Another thing that makes them different from canids, or dogs, is that the abdomen does not tuck into the pelvis. Dogs' bellies kind of go up into the crotch here, and mustelids are just kind of straight tubular all the way through, especially with otters when I get to that slide. I'm gonna go through the rest of this presentation through the subfamilies, which is groups of similar looking mustelids. So we've got Lutrinae up here, which is otters, then Mustelinae, which is the generally weaselly ones, and here we have Ictonychinae. Raise your hand if you've never heard that word before. Yeah, well now you know how to pronounce the word Ictonychinae. Here is Helictidinae, and then we've got Gulaninae, my absolute favorite, and Melanae, which is a European badger, and then these two, they're the only ones in their subfamily, so it wasn't written out, but the honey badger is Melivorinae, and the American badger is Taxidianae. So first off, the classic weasel shape, the murder noodle. There's 2 genera in this family. There's Mustela and Neogale. Neogale was a relatively recent addition. I was just in 2021. So there's the Eurasian stoat, Mustela erminia, and the American ermine. So that's the one that used to be known as Mustela erminia subspecies richardsonii. And then it got elevated to its own species. Then the long-tailed weasel is in a different genus. That's in Neogale frenata. That used to be Mustela as well. And then the least weasel, Mustela nivalis. The American mink. The American mink used to be in Mustela, and then it got added to its own genus Neovicin. And then they realized they were just closely enough related to the long-tailed weasels that now they're in Neogale. So it's always funny when I see books that say Mustela vicin, because that's like 2 iterations out of date. Taxonomy is kind of crazy and hard to keep up with and kind of dizzying, but I like it because I really like how these names sound, and I like knowing things by the proper name. Then there's the Eurasian mink, Mustela lutriola, the polecat, Mustela putorius. Like I said, there's a lot of things that are putorius in these types of animals because they're smelly. The ferret, Mustela furo. Oh yeah, earlier, I think they got elevated to their own species. Taxonomy is still kind of in dispute about whether they're a subspecies of the polecat or their own thing. And then the black-footed ferret, Mustela nigripes. So the word ermine, if you are a furrier or a fur trapper, that means just the white fur of any weasel. But we're not furriers, we're furries. So we're talking about the actual animals. That refers to Mustela erminia or Mustela richardsonii. But stoat also refers to both of those as well. But weasel applies to all of them. Oh, fun fact. This is the Patagonian weasel, Neogale felipei. And if you notice, it's standing on somebody's toilet. This is the best picture in existence of this animal who's on the photographer's toilet. They're just very hard to track down, and sometimes you get insanely lucky, and you can't always control where the weasels want to be. So this one's affectionately known as toilet weasel by Mustelid stands. So they have a triangular snout. I tried to highlight this. And they have really low ears. They don't stick up like cat or dog ears, or even like marten ears. And they have that really fine fur. It's a little longer on minks. So this is a mink here, and these guys are weasels. This is an ermine, and this is a long-tailed weasel because it's got a slightly more buffy yellow undercoat. They literally do not store fat. Because they need to wriggle into burrows and be able to run after things that are vole-shaped and mouse-sized and whatnot, but still have enough power to fight it and kill it and pick it up with just its face and walk it all the way home to eat it. And like I said, they're not truly tubular because you can see their shape does kind of widen out the butt here, and they've got those swole legs. In drawing anatomy in general, remember, it's a good thing to remember that the tail is an extension of the spine. So look at this one that's sitting down, all nice and pretty. And you can see how the spine kind of goes down and then out along the tail. But when they're running, you can see that the tail is kind of just like flush with the top of the back. That just kind of gives you an idea of how noodly these spines are, that they can just like throw out their back like 2 vertebrae like that and become flat at the top instead of rounded at the back. They can bend into like any shape. It's really crazy. You can definitely, that's another thing about cartoons, is you can make them even squigglier than would be possible in real life. I'm not here to douse out its creativity. If you like drawing fat weasels, go for it. Now, examples of this in furry art. So you can see we've got this really narrow triangular snout shape. Got like the low ears. The least weasel does not have the black tip of the tail, but both of the stoats do. And if you draw them bipedal, you can still see how like we can get powerful looking legs that are short, and of course that delightfully bendy spine that can do anything you want. Now, otters, subfamily Lutrinae. They're kind of like that weasel shape, just like super beefed up. If you've ever seen otters swim in the zoo, highly recommend that, or at an aquarium. They're really hypnotizing to watch. Otters are like the easiest to watch in a zoo. All the others kind of are like streaks of brown lightning, and they kind of get blurry and they don't stay in the camera very long. They're aquadynamic, so they can go through that water super fast. So they don't have any rough edges. That's on my next slide. But there are 13 different species of otters. The most common are the North American river otter, Lontra canadensis, the Eurasian otter, Lutra lutra, and the sea otter, Anhydra lutris. The sea otter, see this guy's a sea otter down here, has a shorter snout and also a shorter tail. So I highlighted the tail here. You can see at the base of the tail how it's actually kind of skinny, because sea otters don't have they don't have to propel themselves as much as river otters do, because rivers have stronger currents, so they need more oomph in this tail. to direct their motion and keep themselves moving forward. This guy's a sea otter. You see he's got a little tail. Yeah, he's my mascot. And also the giant otter, Pteronura brasiliensis, is the longest mustelid. So I gave some superlatives earlier, that the wolverine's the biggest, the sea otter's the heaviest, and then the giant otter is the longest. I didn't have any pictures of that in this slideshow, but if you look it up, it looks like it's like the closest thing to an eldritore that you get in the mustelid family. Also, sea otters don't have anal glands. That's not really a thing that comes up when drawing, but it's a fun fact, and I include it anyway, because they spend all their life in the water, so scent communication is kind of useless when you're in the water. When I was at the Georgia Aquarium for FWA, it was very apparent which one didn't have musk glands and which one did. So defining factors of this shape. First, they are big. The North American river otter and the Eurasian river otter are big. Like, they get up to 40 pounds. Sea otters can get up to 100 pounds. They are swole. You can see that the snout here kind of just like comes straight down from the forehead here, with a little dip for the nose. The tail is a continuation of the body. This is probably the biggest factor of that otter shape. So the tail comes like straight out from the body. This is one of the first otters I drew back in 2019 for that challenge. I included that because I drew that and I was like, wow, that actually looked really nice. And the next day I saw a wild otter for the very first time, just on the side of the interstate. So I've been blessed. Now the snout, it's broad and rounded. They got a little bit of a point at the nose. And they have very, very small ears. So once again, the ears don't stick up. And they've got webbed paws. Their fur is short, dense, and oily. They've got minimal floof. So you can see, it's literally a smooth line here. And this one that got out of the water, it's kind of like, it's still sticking low to the body here. So not that many floofs. Of course, you can draw them as floofy as you want if that brings you joy. I'm not here to steal anybody's joy. Also, another thing, I mentioned this earlier, is that they don't have undershading all the way to the tail. You can see here, it's got this lighter fur on the chest, and here in the belly, it's that darker color. So it kind of fades off a little below the armpits. Now, I showed you my otter OC from my comic that has undershading all the way to the tail because it makes him stand out more and makes him more easily distinguished from my Martin character who has a bib. So, like I said, you can break the rules if you want. And another thing, they have a uniform coat length. So a lot of mustelids will have longer fur on the tail, so it kind of poofs out. And these guys don't, so it's nice and smooth. You should use the same texture of pen, I guess, or of pen strokes when you're drawing the tail as when you're drawing the rest of them. Now here's some more art of that that shows how that shape, the tail just continues on from the body here, and that shorter, rounder snout, and the low ears. Weasel's comic here that I pulled some references from is called Bizarre Beasts, Land of Longbark. It can be read at her Fur Affinity page. Most of the artists here are cited by their Fur Affinity usernames. Now, the floofy murder noodle. So this is Ictonicinae, that fun word. This is the marbled polecat here. This is the Grison. It basically looks like a honey badger, except it lives in South America, and the honey badger lives in Africa. So they're the bulk is intermediate between minks and river otters, but they also have that really luxuriant fur. They all have dark face masks. They can also spray their musk like skunks. So there's the greater Grison, that's this guy, Galictus vittata, and there's the lesser Grison, Galictus puja. And there's the marbled polecat, Vormella paragusna. That's this guy with the fluffy pantaloons and the delightful speckling and these adorable fluffy ears. And then the African striped weasel, Pisagale albinuca, and the Patagonian weasel, Lyncodon patagonicus. So they're very obscure, but they're all wonderful. So shape differences between these three, just to kind of recap. So we can see that the weasel's tail is kind of below, whereas the otter has is that smooth continuum here. Like I can see the belly line here going into the base of the tail is a smooth line because they're an undulous wave. And they've got different snout because this has the otter has this blunted off snout, whereas the weasel has this sharp triangular snout. And then the African striped weasel has this, they got a little divot on their snout here. And of course, all that extra floof up at the top. Now the treasels, these are my favorite. I am biased. This is subfamily Gulaninae. That includes the wolverine, Gulo gulo, the tayra, Ira barbara, that's on the next slide, the fisher, Picania pennanti, and the 8 different martins in genus Martes. Now, here's another thing. Pine martin
only refers to one species, Martes martes, that is in Eurasia. So we don't have pine martens in this country. They're just martens, or American martens, or Pacific martens. We also have the sable, that's Martes zabellina. That's the one that you can keep as a pet in Russia, that there's a lot of adorable internet videos of. Then the Neogale martin, Martes quatkinsii, the Japanese martin, Martes melampus, and the yellow-throated martin, otherwise known as the Karza, Martes flavigula. So yeah, pine martens are only found in Eurasia, if you're going by that species. And they've got coarser and shaggier fur than the other mustelids, so you can kind of see really how it hangs down in these guys. And they have much more prominent ears. Like you see, they stick out really much on the martens here. They've got kind of triangular ears here, and they're visible at the top of the head. And they have a longer snout, and it's less flush with the forehead. You can see they all kind of have that divot there. And they also, the martens and the fishers have retractable claws. And they can also purr, so they kind of they got cat-coated, which I think is really cool. They all have different tail textures, which is funny because all the other subfamilies kind of have the same vibe, but these, they're all different. So you've got that coarse, bushy tail for the wolverine, that fine, bushy, rounded tail in the martens, and then fishers and tayras kind of have a taper that's intermediately bushy. So comparing these shapes, because this is really like the miscellaneous box of the mustelid family. So this is a tayra here. They live in South Africa where it's really hot, so they don't need to be as chunky and as densely furred as the others because they're trying to lose heat. You can just see where the legs are, how the snout looks, how the ears lie. If I didn't say this before, I highly, highly recommend reference images, and you can even copy poses if you want. Anyone who tells you not to do that is trying to gatekeep. Yeah, you can copy things, you can copy poses, you can use reference images. It doesn't make you less of an artist. In fact, it makes you better at drawing those things later by yourself. So now, treasel art. I could not fit all the ones I wanted to fit onto the slide because there's just so many of them. But yeah, you can really see that dip in the snout here, that tail taper. This is a fisher and this is a marten. You can even just see how that tail texture was drawn differently by the same artist to convey that difference between one being a marten and one being a fisher. And you can see the marten's got like ears that stick up a little more. This guy is Martenzilla. Kiwi made a zine of them, and it's absolutely delightful. Now here's the one you almost certainly did not know about. That's subfamily Helictidae. Now there's Helictidae, and that's a family of green metallic sweat bees. So like I said, taxonomy is kind of confusing, easy to get crossed up. But these are the ferret badgers. They are in the genus Melogale, mellow meaning badger and gale meaning weasel. I really could not come up with a better name for these animals. They really look like they're halfway between ferrets and badgers. I mean, they've got that narrow, ferrety snout, but that general badgery heft and coarseness to the fur. And if you look at this guy's claws, like they are like talons. Like look how far out those claws go. They have a narrow, elongate snout that kind of like sticks out like that. When I did this presentation at FWA, I said it's a bummer that like nobody draws these because I can't find art of them. And then I found this one on Fur Affinity that Fred had drawn, and she gave me permission to use that, and I was very happy. And then literally like on Thursday, I found a character of a Javan ferret badger, because this one's that the artist is a Chinese ferret badger. And then I found art of a Javan ferret badger on Artfight. And I was like, wow, now I have to attack this. So I drew a Javan ferret badger named Egg Tortellini. It was adorable. So yeah, it's on my socials if you check that out. I'm not going to tell how to tell all these apart. It's mainly which Pacific island or Asiatic landmass is this animal living on. Because that's how species work sometimes. That's how you tell apart an American ermine from a Eurasian ermine, is which continent are you on? So they're different species because gene pools are isolated from each other geographically. Now here is the badgers, or like I think to ravioli edition of Murder Noodles. The first time I saw badgers at the zoo, I was like, they really do just look like ravioli. They're just like a splooty, like flour sack body that can spawn 4 limbs, a tail, and a head kind of wherever they want. That includes 3 different subfamilies. We've got Melanae, the Eurasian badgers, so that's the genera Meles and Arctonix, and the American badger in subfamily Taxidianae, and then subfamily Melivorinae, the ratel, otherwise known as the honey badger, the one that is famous for not caring. They can turn around in their own skin. That's probably the most important thing when drawing badgers, is that they are very, very, very loose. Their skin is not tight at all. That's also why they can go for honeycombs and whatnot, because they can eat bees. And the only place they can actually get stung and actually feel it is right on the nose, because their skin is just that loose. And you think about it, they're fossorial mammals. They live underground, they dig burrows, so they can kind of just whip around. They've got an incredible turning radius. They've got the turning radius of a smart car in their own body. And then they can lash out with those massive claws. I mean, I circled the claws in all of these. That's another thing, when you're drawing badgers, you gotta give them wicked claws. That's like a defining feature, because they got to dig all that soil out, and they've got a much blunter snout and a broader head than other mustelids, since they're trying to be that earth-moving, powerful shape instead of that quick, elongate, narrow, scurrying shape. And they have short tails too, shorter tails than the rest of the mustelids, and they've got really long, shaggy fur. And you can tell them apart, basically, if you're not sure what kind of badger you have, by looking at the color of the tail. This will be on my next slide as well. So honey badgers have black tails, Eurasian badgers have silvery white grayish tails, and then the American badgers have brownish tan tails. So how to tell these apart? This is another thing that makes me really irked, is when I see people confusing their badgers. Again, if you remember from that slide towards the beginning, my own American badger OC for my comic has 5 facial stripes, because I just didn't feel like drawing all 9, and I gave her a marking on the back of her neck instead. So like I said, yeah, you don't have to draw this exactly, but if you're trying to tell these apart, so the American badger has a more compact snout, whereas you got a much longer snout in this Eurasian badger. And so this one has pelage mostly in shades of brown, so that shows up more prominently on the chest and the tail. You can see that tannish color. They all still have silver and gray and black down the back. This one has 9 facial stripes, because it's got that little divot under the ears. And you can see how the ears are a lot lower too, whereas they kind of stick up and are fluffy on this guy. So they got different snout shapes too. And this one just has the 5, the 2 down the middle, like this sticker that I was so graciously given at the start of this panel. And here's badger art. So we've got the American badger over here, and you can see how we've got that anatomic accuracy, but it still manages to look cartoony. These are very vivid expressions. You still got the right number of teeth, and you still got cool hand gestures with the really long claws that can make it hard sometimes. They've got that shade of brown, tan taupe kind of for the fur. And then the European badgers over here are they're all shades of gray. And you can see it's got the fluffy ears up here. This guy's got fluffy ear tufts, and of course the 5 stripes and that longer snout that still ends kind of blunt like this. Now, this is another addition from the FWA slides. I wanted to talk about teeth, because that's another thing I had to do in college. Was I had an exam where you walk into the room and it's just a bunch of skulls, and you have to tell which one is which based on the teeth. And the mustelids are actually really easy to do that for by the teeth, just because they have this last upper molar that is a different shape in all of them. They also have different numbers of teeth. So the Gulaninae, they have 38 teeth. That's 18 over 20. They have 5 cheek teeth over 6. Cheek teeth are basically everything behind the fang here. And the upper molar is kind of shaped like the number 8. Then the otters have 36 teeth. That's 18 over 18. They've got 5 cheek teeth on top and 5 on bottom. And that upper molar is rectangular. And then the others have 34. That's 16 teeth over 18. They only have 4 cheek teeth on top in each quadrant. And so this, you can tell that this one is from subfamily Mustelinae, because you can see here's the fang here. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4 cheek teeth at the top. And that last upper molar is kind of shaped like a dumbbell, kind of constricted like that. Whereas a badger would have it be triangular. This is the carnassial tooth. This is the one that allows them to shear meat, and they've got one that matches on the bottom to form kind of like a guillotine. Mustelids have the strongest bite force out of any mammal. So yeah, they're biters. For reference, dogs have 42 teeth, raccoons have 40, humans have 32, and cats have 28 to 30, with the lynxes having fewer teeth for whatever reason. Does anybody know which animal has the most teeth on this continent? Yeah, it's the opossum. They have 50 teeth. Yeah, every fact I learned about opossums is like gloriously cursed. They have 15 teeth, 50 teeth, 50. They also have 13 nipples.
Oh.
They're 12 in a circle, and number 13 is in the middle, like a bullseye. Yeah, so you wonder why that animal just looks like and acts like a gremlin. It's just because every fact about them is gremlin-y. But I'm not here to talk about opossums. I'm here to talk about mustelids. Now to recap about the snouts and ears. So that otter shape is kind of that blunt, rounded off shape, and that weasel shape is kind of that narrow, triangular, kind of conical there. The ears are always low. Got to draw the ears low and rounded. Martins, I guess, kind of stick up a little bit, but even so, they're still rounded and they're still lower than other mammals. And then the general body shape changes. We got that tubular form. We've got these swole hind legs kind of in all of them. The badgers are kind of like amorphously shaped. Their body mass just kind of hangs down and wherever they want their legs to be. And then the otters, of course, are all smooth edges everywhere. Yeah, don't draw any sharp corners on them. Fur textures, so yeah, they've got some of the best fur in the world, some of the most expensive if you're a fur trapper. And so we've got various textures here. We've got this sleek otter coat that's very low to the body and like a little more floof on the mink. And they've got very fluffy and shaggy and coarse from the badger fur, and this really fluffy, light, soft and dense marten fur. And then like the fisher fur is a little shaggier and coarser than that, but still that long, soft, fluffy texture. And then tails at the very end, of course. So we've got all kinds of different tail shapes here. We've got the taper kind of in the otters, and we've got that really short, rounded nub that badgers have. And then stoats and weasel, like the ermines, kind of have these long tails. They get a little bushier at the tip, but it's about tubular as well. And this grison has kind of a bushy tail. It's like a little longer than the badger's tail, but still not that long. It's still not quite that coarse. And then, of course, the really fluffy, rounded one that the marten has with that rounded tip, and the tapered tip that the fisher has here. So now I'm going to use the rest of my presentation to answer any questions you have about mustelids. Yes, you in the back.
Yeah. Oh, should I bring the mic over here? Yes. Actually, I don't know if my cord is going to stretch that long.
Nope, I only have this much cord. Can you just articulate and I'll repeat it into the mic? Forgot. That is okay. Does anybody else have questions? Yes.
So when an otter, you said they have like a very oily fur. Their fur even sticks to their skin kind of when they're dry as well?
Yeah, it lays down. It gets like a little, like when it sticks up kind of when it's drying, but not when it's dry. Like kind of like when you get out of the shower and your hair's all spiky like that. But yeah, they've got very oily fur because since they're in the water all the time, they don't want the water, they want the water to flow past their fur, not get through it, and make them heavier and slow it down. So yeah, they're super oily. Yes?
Okay, I don't know if you heard of like a TikTok animal review called natural habitats.
Yes, natural habitats. Yes.
There was one I saw about that some Muslims actually shed their fur color, or what's that, shed or to change their fur color to.
Yes. Yeah. So the stoats, the ones that get that ermine colored, that white colored fur, so that's Mustela richardsonii, Neogale frenata, Mustela erminia. They shed, and the least weasel as well, Mustela nivalis. They shed their coats to white. And this is, fun fact, this is based on the photoperiod, so how long the daylight is in a day. This is known from an experiment that was done by Sylvia Fetter in 1979, I think. But she trapped weasels from Alaska, from Fairbanks, and then weasels from Oregon, and then she kept them in a room that had no exposure to the sun and made artificial light conditions. And the Alaskan weasels started shedding their fur earlier because they've got different day lengths there, and they need to get their winter coat out sooner. Also because it is their winter fur is thicker. So even the mustelids that don't change color, they still kind of go through a molt so they can get that thick winter fur. Obviously not like the tayras and the rattels and the ones that live in really hot climates, but the ones that live in cold climates, they do get thicker fur in the winter. And it doesn't always change color, but it often does to make them blend in with the snow. And also the tail tip, that the tail tip does stay black when they molt. And this is theoretically a defense against like hawks and owls, because that's a major predator of weasels, is birds that swoop from the sky. And it's a lot easier for a bird to aim for your tail than your head. If it's aiming for your tail, you can yank that out of the way, you can run away, and you can not die. But if your head is the part that's black and stands out against the snow, then you've got less chance of escaping.
Whisker placement and size and all that,
They are very whiskery, but they do have a lot of whiskers that kind of come out right between, like a little bit back of the nose, and they've got ones that go up from the corners of the eyebrows, basically, to feel things above them. You can see even on my otter Webkins, he's got whiskers here. He's a sea otter. Sea otters have whiskers too, to feel currents in the water and things moving around there. Yes?
So what shape are the paws?
Oh, I should have mentioned this. Yes, the paws are webbed in most of them, actually. I circled this in, I think it was the Grayson picture. Yeah, so this one you can kind of see that membrane between the toes. And like even martins have webbed membrane between the toes, which is kind of funny because martins are aquaphobic. They hate being wet in the water. Mainly, I think that's because since their fur is so light and fluffy and not oily like otters, when they get wet, like they're toast. It really weighs them down, and they're not aquadynamic at all. And that's another thing. So Fisher, my persona, is not named for its habit of eating fish. It comes from the word meaning fidget, which was another synonym for polecat. Yeah, they don't eat fish. They eat snowshoe hares and porcupines. When I took that one comics class I mentioned, we had to pick non-legal names to cartoon under, and so it was good practice for becoming a furry, but the name I picked was Porcupine Flipper because I was studying fishers at the time. And that was the first time I drew my persona, was in the about the author. Okay, furry lore. I was doing this zine for my comics class, and we had to draw ourselves like every day as a warm-up, and I really hated every drawing of myself. Like I could not just get a consistent shape. It was like all over the place. Like I forgot to draw my glasses like most of the time. I forgot to draw how to draw my hair or whatnot. I couldn't do any of my proportions. And then they gave us an assignment to draw or to collect a story from a family member and illustrate that using anthropomorphic animals. So I made this 3-page comic with a badger, and that was like the most intricate thing I'd done in the entire zine. It was like super complicated, drawing my godmother as a badger, but it was like, with all those complicated, it was easy. I was like, oh, this is just popping off. It was looked the same in like every panel, easy sense of character, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm better at that. And so then for the about the artist section at the back, I drew myself as a fisher to kind of be a nod to the name Porcupine Flipper. And then it wasn't until 2 years after that I was like, okay, yeah, this is just me now. So that's how I draw myself now. Yes, you in the back.
Building on that, but in a different direction, how does the paw structure work for example, holding things?
For holding, so this is a question kind of about making that cartoony style, right?
Sort of.
Yeah. So, you can kind of experiment with things for what's going to, if you have if you're drawing your Mustelids bipedal, you can still, I'm gonna find this. Yeah, so here you can still get that articulation on each of the digits. You can give them enough bend to hold things, and the paws aren't truly webbed all the way up, so they're not like muskrats. They're better at holding things. If you're talking about the real animals themselves, they mostly hold things with their mouth and not their paws, so they don't need to do that. But if you're drawing furry characters that act human-ish enough to use their paws for things like grasping, you can still do that. You can still mess around with that. They have that 5th digit that's still just kind of back. They're not in a true circle. So there is a thumb-like digit that you can use. Which is also why a thing I like about drawing them is that they're analogous enough to humans, but they're still totally different and totally crittery. Yes.
one of the things, I mean, you're talking about like wanting the artist to draw it, so like, oh yeah, that's muscle, I recognize it. The thing I kind of always sort of pick at is there's a little divot in the top corner of the eye from the true weasels, and martens in particular, right? And that's, if I get it right,
Yes, that's since for instance, like I draw with colored pencils. That's one of those things that if I draw it, it's like if you draw that wrong, it like really looks messed up. But yeah, you can see they have kind of that divot here in the snout.
It looks like a frown.
And yeah, it kind of gives them that frown. And that's the thing too, because I tried drawing that in one of my Mustelid May drawings on a Japanese marten, and it really didn't turn out. Like I was trying to do like a smile with that, and it looked like it was like angry, and I was like, ah, okay. So yeah, like I said, you can sacrifice design elements to get the expressions you want. But if you can make it work, all power to you. Yes, you can see on this guy, especially because the American marten has a much lighter colored head. So you can see it's got those things kind of above the eyes, like they're excellent eye makeup. You can adapt things as you like in ways that are convenient to you. Yes?
This might seem a stupid question, but
No stupid questions.
I've read conflicting things about it in the past. Are they, to what degree are they capable of moving their ears and tail?
Oh, that's a good question. So the ears are the ears are a lot less mobile. So there isn't much body language you can get out of the ears, because you can see just the way they're anchored. Well, especially in the weasels, but you just see it's got that very flat base here. So there's not much room for mobility. But the tails are very excitable. So they don't wag kind of like canines do, but they will do like a little fluff and like wiggle it back and forth rapidly when they're excited, and they'll lash them when they're angry. I think that's delightful. There's lots of video. I think I was literally like retweeting people sending me videos of mustelid tail wiggles, because that brings me so much joy. So yeah, they don't wag per se, because wagging I guess in dogs is a sustained movement. They keep that going for a long time, whereas mustelids kind of just like whoosh, like, oh, I had all this energy and I had to get it out now because I'm so excited to be a weasel, which is a mood. If I was a weasel, I am a weasel. I'm excited to be a weasel all the time. It makes me very happy. It's the greatest joy in my life. Any more questions? Yes, you in the back.
So this is more of a curiosity question. I recently learned that martens have horizontal pupils.
Yeah, all of them do, in fact, have horizontal pupils. I don't know if I got any. Oh, maybe it might be this one. But there are definitely artists that draw them with horizontal pupils. I don't know if I got their art into this slideshow or not, but yes, they have horizontal pupils. It's just hard to see because they've got dark eyes in general, and also they're mostly nocturnal, and also they've got their sclera are barely visible, so it's mostly just pupil anyway, and they've got, mostly iris. Yeah, I do remember the words for different parts of the eye. Mostly iris and pupil, to give their eyes that really dark, beady look. But yes, they do have rectangular pupils that go horizontal. So they're not like cats that go top to bottom, or us that go in and out in a dilating circle. Once again, I don't draw that in my own art as much just because I tried it. That's another, where I tried doing a lot of these anatomically accurate things. I was like, this just makes the expression look wrong in the way I'm capable of drawing it. So, but if you can do that, like there are artists that can, and if you are one of them, absolutely, yes.
Would you say they have Funko Pop eyes?
I would actually. I would not have thought that myself, but now I can't unsee that. They do kind of have Funko Pop eyes, especially, it's most apparent on the ermines. You can just see it's like a little black dot, basically. Yeah. And if you can get emotion, like I said, for comics, instead of you're making comics not photorealism, you want them to have that expressiveness. And if you can get emotion out of just a little dot eye, good for you. Do that. Yes.
Whenever I watch videos of any mustelids like badgers or any kind of weasel, I noticed that the way they move is like they kind of take a couple steps and then they stop and they freeze. It's like they can't move and think at the same time.
Yes, every video of Mustelids just being weaselly just fills my heart with joy. Oh, that's so me. That's so delightful. But, yes. Yeah.
Is there any explanation for that behavior biologically, I guess?
I don't know if it has a biological explanation, more of a psychological one. You have to keep in mind that in all those videos, there is somebody with a camera that they are reacting to. They do just run like straight in the wild and they don't need to stop all the time. But they got a very bouncy, fast-paced gait, so I guess if thoughts catch up to them, then they might need to take a break to be like, all right, where was I going? What was I doing again?
ADHD women?
Yes, I have ADHD, and that's why I see myself represented in the Mustelidae. Yes.
Have you seen the one where he's like, it's some kind of ring doorbell footage of, they're just weasels that just jump on a trampoline?
Yes.
Crazy.
If you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend looking it up. But yeah, there's a couple videos of, and there's one of martins, one of fishers, and one of, weasels doing it too. But on a trampoline, and they just run up to that and just bounce around on it for a few minutes, and it's so delightful. So yeah, Carnivora as a clade in general is very playful, and especially the Mustelids. So they do stuff like that, which is just so adorable. Yeah, they have fun. They have zest for life. Yes.
This is just a side note. Do you know Ferret Software and seeing their live streams because they have like they do
for like the black-footed ferrets at the.
No, this one's like ferret owners, so they have multiple ferrets and they like have live streams of them sleeping and sometimes being.
Yeah, I do know those exist. I don't know any specific ones. I do know though that the National Black-Footed Ferret Conservation Center in Colorado does have a live stream running of their black-footed ferrets a lot of the time. That's really cool to see too. It's also funny to compare that to behavior of captive domestic ferrets because they're still very shockingly similar. Well, that's not an endorsement of keeping a black-footed ferret as a pet. The only one that you should keep as pets are the ones that are domesticated species. That's the ferret and the sable. There's just two of them. All the others are too chaotic, and if you let them into your house, they will destroy you. Yeah. All right. Anyway, yeah, adorably, yes, but nonetheless destroyed. Like people feel like
foxes.
Yeah, people are like, oh, you love Mustelids so much. Why don't you have it as a pet? I'm like, oh God, no. I would be an inferior being. Like I would not be able to contain it. Yes.
Choke on things really easily.
That's an interesting question. I actually don't know the answer to.
I've heard of many a weasel just kind of dying because someone left out like something like a seed that was a bit too big and got caught in his throat.
I guess. Well, because they certainly will try to eat most. Well, I think weasels are almost entirely carnivorous, and then the bigger ones are more omnivorous. So the paper I did was dietary ecology of fishers, and they've got they eat like mushrooms and berries and kind of whatever sources of protein and nutrients they can get. But weasels almost exclusively eat meat, and almost exclusively fresh meat, so they can tear that up. Ferrets, yeah, since they're domesticated, they've got some of those domestic dog-like behaviors that include hoovering up anything edible that lands on the floor. They like stealing things and eating them, including like socks and keys and things that shouldn't be stolen and or eaten. Yes.
Ones famously eat Audis and.
Yes, that is the stone martin, otherwise known as the beach martin, Martes foina. There have been several instances of them eating people's car engines to get minerals out of them. A lot of rodents will do that too. I'm from Wisconsin, and if you leave your car up north and you come back from a long hiking trip and you turn on and all of the warning lights come on, that's called getting porked, because a porcupine ate the salt out of your car. But yeah, stone martins do that too. There's also a video of a stone martin that got into a grocery store and ran through the liquor aisle and toppled over every bottle of wine. And it's just sitting on the top shelf and wiggling its tail and smiling mischievously. They do have an eye for that. Oh, that's a fun fact about stone martins / beach martins. is that they are on this continent. There is a small population in southeastern Wisconsin that they escaped from a fur farm in Burlington, and they usually when that happens, that they just die out. But these guys didn't for whatever reason. Now they're here. There's very, very little studies done on that. I remember because I was asking PhD people about potential research questions, and I was like, oh, maybe I could do that. But I'm staying tuned because that's kind of fascinating to me. Yeah. Any more questions? Yes.
There was a bit of a debate about the origination of badgers, whether they came from North America, or of mustelids rather, whether they came from North America and moved to Europe, or Europe and moved to North America.
Ooh, I don't actually know that, but I do know that the ones in Eurasia are called Old World martens or Old World mustelids, but I'm not sure if that's because they were there first.
Because Eurasia is the old world.
Exactly, just because they like, dating things in terms of white people. Which is kind of a bummer, but I'm actually not sure of that. I do know though that the American, like the Neogale clade, so the American ermine, and then the long-tailed weasel, and the American mink evolved afterwards. They were more recent to colonize. But then when you take American minks back to Britain, they actually outcompete the Eurasian mink. And they're kind of actually like an invasive species threat. And the stoats are an invasive species threat in New Zealand. Yep. Yeah, they're eating all the bird eggs because they're so egg-pilled. I love those eggs. And of course, they're very, very hard to contain and stop. So they're quite a threat to that island's ecology.
That maybe half of everything, all the research we've ever been given is by the New Zealand government trying to stop it.
Yes. Yes, there are some New Zealand. I think Carolyn King is probably the most prominent mustelid researcher from New Zealand. What am I doing for time? I'm a little after, but I can. If there are any more questions, I can take those too. All right, you are an excellent crowd for being at this hour on a Sunday morning. Thank you so much.
Yes. So at Gale. Oh, those are adorable. That's awesome. I'm so glad. That's part of I figured it's I was kind of my target audience for this.